The metal handcuffs clicked shut around Amara's wrists as she stood outside the small grocery store in Lagos. Her heart pounded like thunder as the two police officers pushed her against their patrol car. "Please, officers, I did nothing wrong," she said with tears flowing down her cheeks. The taller officer laughed and said, "That is what they all say, lady. You people think you can steal and walk away free." Amara felt her world spinning as curious people gathered around to watch. She had only gone to buy bread for her sick mother, but somehow the store owner accused her of stealing money from the counter. The shorter officer was already calling his boss on the radio saying, "We caught another thief, sir. This one looks like she has some money, though. Look at her clean clothes and nice shoes." Amara's hands shook as she realized these officers had already decided she was guilty without even asking her name or hearing her side of the story. The crowd grew larger as word spread through the busy street that someone had been arrested. Some people shook their heads sadly while others whispered among themselves. Amara could hear children asking their mothers what was happening. An old woman in the crowd shouted, "Let her speak, officers. At least ask her what happened." But the tall officer waved his hand dismissively and said, "Mind your business, mama. We know how to do our job." Amara looked around desperately hoping someone would help her. She thought about her husband Chaik, who was probably in his office across the city having important meetings. He had no idea that his wife was being treated like a common criminal on the streets. The store owner came out again and pointed at Amara saying, "Yes, that is the woman who stole my money. I saw her take it from my counter when I was not looking." Amara's voice cracked as she pleaded, "Sir, I never touched your money. I only came to buy bread for my sick mother. Please check your cameras if you have them." The store owner laughed and said, "Cameras are expensive, my dear. Poor people like us cannot afford such things." The officer started pushing Amara toward their car as she stumbled in her handcuffs. "Where are you taking me?" she asked fearfully. The shorter officer replied harshly, "To the station where you belong. You will stay there until someone pays your fine or until the court decides what to do with you." Amara felt panic rising in her chest as she thought about her mother waiting at home for the bread and medicine. "Please, officers, let me make one phone call. My husband will come and sort this out," she begged. The tall officer stopped and looked at her suspiciously. "Your husband, eh? What does he do for work that makes you think he can help you?" Amara hesitated because she knew that if she told them the truth, they might not believe her. "He works in business, sir. He is a good man who will vouch for me." The officer laughed again and said, "Business, you say? Let me guess he sells phone cards or repairs televisions." The crowd murmured as they watched the officers mock the young woman, who seemed so scared and helpless. As they reached the police car, Amara made a decision that would change everything. She looked straight at the tall officer and said, "Please, sir, I am begging you with everything in my heart. Let me make one phone call to my husband. If he cannot help, then I will go quietly to your station." Something in her voice made the officer pause. Maybe it was the way her eyes filled with tears, or how she spoke with such desperate hope. The shorter officer was impatient and said, "Come on, partner, let us just take her. We are wasting time here." But the tall officer studied Amara's face for a long moment. He noticed her gold wedding ring and the way she carried herself with dignity, even in handcuffs. "Fine," he said, pulling out his phone. "You get 2 minutes to call this husband of yours. But when he cannot help you, we are leaving immediately." Amara's hands trembled as she gave him the number. She prayed silently that Chaik would answer his phone and that somehow he could fix this terrible situation. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before a strong voice answered, "Hello, this is Chaik Okafor." Amara started crying harder when she heard her husband's familiar voice. "Chaik, my love, it is me, Amara. I am in trouble and I need your help right now." There was immediate concern in his voice as he asked, "My dear, what is wrong? Where are you?" Through her tears she explained, "I am at Mama Ngozi's store on Balogun Street." The police have arrested me for stealing money, but I did not do it. They have put me in handcuffs and want to take me to the station." The officers in the crowd could hear Chike's voice getting louder through the phone. "Which officers are these?" he demanded. "Give the phone to the officer in charge right now." The tall officer took the phone reluctantly and said, "Hello, sir. This is Sergeant Johnson. Your wife was caught stealing from a local store. We are just doing our job." What happened next shocked everyone, including Amara. Chike's voice came through the phone so clearly that people in the crowd could hear every word. "Sergeant Johnson, this is Chief Chike Okafor speaking. I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you. The woman you have in handcuffs is my wife, Mrs. Amara Okafor. She is also the daughter of the late Professor Adebayo, who served this country for 40 years. I am currently in a meeting with the governor and several government ministers, but I am leaving right now to come there. If you harm one hair on my wife's head, or if you do not remove those handcuffs immediately, there will be consequences that will reach the highest levels of government. Do you understand me clearly, Sergeant Johnson?" The officer's face went completely white as he recognized the name. Everyone in Nigeria knew Chief Chike Okafor, the billionaire businessman who built schools and hospitals across the country. The shorter officer grabbed his partner's arm and whispered urgently, "Do you know who that is? That is the man who donated 50 million naira to the police academy last year. The man whose face is on television every week helping poor people." The tall officer's hand started shaking as he held the phone. His voice became much smaller as he said, "Sir, I had no idea she was your wife. She never told us her name. We were just responding to a complaint from the store owner." Chike's voice remained firm but controlled. "Sergeant, I do not care about excuses right now. Remove those handcuffs from my wife immediately and treat her with the respect she deserves. I am sending my driver to bring her home safely while I finish handling some urgent business. But know this, Sergeant Johnson, your actions today will be reported to your superiors and to internal affairs. How you treat people, especially innocent people, says everything about your character as a police officer." The crowd had grown silent listening to this powerful conversation. Some people started taking pictures with their phones, while others whispered about the incredible turn of events. The store owner, who had been so confident before now, looked worried and kept wiping sweat from his forehead. As soon as the handcuffs came off, Amara rubbed her sore wrists and stood tall with renewed dignity. The officers who had been so rough with her now spoke in polite, respectful tones. "Ma, we are very sorry for this misunderstanding," the tall officer said while avoiding her eyes. "We were just following procedure, but we should have asked more questions first." Amara looked at both officers and then at the store owner who had accused her falsely. Instead of anger, her voice was filled with sadness as she said, "You see what just happened here today. When you thought I was poor and powerless, you treated me like garbage. You did not ask my name or listen to my story. You decided I was guilty because of how you see poor people in your minds. But when you learned my husband has money and power, suddenly I became worthy of respect." The shorter officer shifted uncomfortably and mumbled, "Ma, we treat everyone the same way." Amara shook her head and replied, "No, you do not, officer. And that is the problem with how some people think in this world." The crowd began to clap slowly as Amara continued speaking. Her voice grew stronger as she said, "My husband, Chief Chike, was not born rich. He grew up in a poor family just like many of you here today. His mother sold oranges by the roadside to pay for his school fees. His father worked as a security guard for 20 years, saving every kobo so his son could have a better life. Chike learned that success is not just about making money for yourself. It is about lifting up other people who are still struggling. That is why he builds schools for children who cannot afford education. That is why he pays for medical treatment for families who are sick and have no money. He remembers what it feels like to be treated badly because you are poor." The tall officer looked ashamed as he said, "Ma, your husband is a good man. Everyone knows the work he does for this country." Amara nodded and said, "Yes, he is a good man. But I should not have needed to call a rich, powerful husband to be treated with basic human dignity. Every person deserves respect whether they have money or not, whether they wear fine clothes or simple clothes, whether they live in big houses or small rooms." As Chike's driver arrived in a black Mercedes to take Amara home safely, the crowd began to disperse. Many people came to shake her hand and thank her for the words she had spoken. An old man with gray hair said, "My daughter, you have taught us something important today. Money and power should not be the only things that make people treat you well." A young mother holding her baby said, "I will remember your words and teach them to my children. Everyone deserves respect no matter where they come from." The store owner approached Amara nervously and said, "Ma, I am sorry for accusing you wrongly. I was angry because I had lost some money earlier and I blamed the first person I could find. It was not fair to you." Amara looked at him with kind eyes and said, "Sir, I forgive you because anger and fear make people do things they regret later. But please remember this day and try to be more careful before you accuse someone of wrongdoing." As she got into the car, she turned to address the officers one final time. "I hope you both will remember this experience and treat every citizen with fairness and respect. Your job is to protect and serve all people, not just the ones who have money and connections. That is what will make you truly good officers." The two policemen nodded solemnly, but they had no idea that their troubles were just beginning. 3 hours later, Sergeant Johnson and his partner were sitting nervously in the office of Chief Inspector Adamu at police headquarters. Word had traveled fast about what happened on Balogun Street, and now both officers faced serious questions about their conduct. Chief Inspector Adamu was a stern man with 30 years of police experience, and he did not tolerate officers who brought shame to the uniform. "So tell me, Sergeant Johnson," he said, looking at the report on his desk, "you arrested a woman for theft without asking her name or getting her statement first." The tall officer shifted in his chair and replied, "Sir, the store owner was very sure that she took his money. We were just responding to his complaint." Chief Inspector Adamu leaned back and studied both men carefully. "In my 30 years of service, I have learned that good police work requires patience, investigation, and respect for all citizens. You two seem to have forgotten these basic principles." The shorter officer tried to defend their actions by saying, "Sir, we arrest many thieves every day. This seemed like a normal case until we found out who her husband was." The chief inspector's eyes flashed with anger as he said, "Officer, that is exactly the problem. Every case should be handled with the same care, whether the person is married to a billionaire or married to a bus driver." Meanwhile, across the city, Chike Okafor was having his own important conversation. He had called an emergency meeting with the police commissioner and several government officials who worked on police reform. As one of the country's most respected businessmen and philanthropists, Chike had the power to demand real change. "Commissioner, I am not calling this meeting because my wife was mistreated," he began as he sat in the large conference room. "I am here because what happened to her happens to hundreds of innocent people every day across our country. The only difference is that those people do not have a husband who can make one phone call and change everything." The police commissioner nodded gravely and said, "Chief Okafor, you are absolutely right. This incident has shown us problems in our system that need immediate attention." Chike continued, "Commissioner, my wife could have spent days or weeks in jail for a crime she did not commit. Her life could have been destroyed because 2 officers decided she was guilty based on how she looked. This is not the kind of police force our country deserves." The Minister of Justice, who was also present, said, "Chief, what do you suggest we do to address these problems?" Chike had clearly thought about this question and was ready with detailed answers. "First," Chike said firmly, "every police officer in this country needs better training on how to handle arrests and investigations. They must learn to ask questions, gather evidence, and treat every citizen with dignity, regardless of their social class. The commissioner wrote notes as Chaik continued. Second, we need better supervision of officers in the field. Too many police work without proper oversight, which leads to abuse of power. The Minister of Justice asked, what about the store owner who made the false accusation? Should there be consequences for him too? Chaik thought for a moment before responding. The store owner was wrong, but he was also acting out of frustration and fear. Instead of punishment, I suggest we create programs to help business owners install security cameras and learn better ways to protect their property. Prevention is better than punishment. The police commissioner was impressed by Chaik's thoughtful approach and said, Chief, your ideas make sense, but implementing these changes will require time and resources. Chaik smiled and said, Commissioner, I am prepared to personally fund a training program for police officers across 3 states. But I want to see real commitment to change from the government as well. This was typical of Chaik's approach to solving problems. He did not just complain, he offered solutions and backed them up with his own resources. Back at home, Amara was sitting with her elderly mother, telling her about the frightening experience. Her mother, Mama Aduni, was a wise woman who had lived through many difficult times in Nigeria's history. My daughter, she said, holding Amara's hands gently, God used this bad experience to teach important lessons to many people today. Amara nodded and said, Mama, I keep thinking about all the people who go through worse things than I did because they have no one to help them. Her mother smiled proudly and said, that thinking shows you have a good heart just like your husband. You both understand that with blessing comes responsibility. As they talked, Amara's phone rang and she saw it was her best friend Kemi calling. Amara, I just heard what happened to you today, Kemi said with concern in her voice. Are you okay, my sister? Amara assured her friend that she was fine, but Kemi wanted to know all the details. As Amara told the story again, she realized how much the experience had changed her perspective on life. Kemi, I have been thinking about starting a foundation to help people who face injustice in our legal system, she said. So many innocent people suffer because they cannot afford good lawyers or because they do not know their rights. Kemi was excited by this idea and said, that would be wonderful, Amara. You and Chaik could really make a difference in people's lives. That evening when Chaik came home, he found Amara in their garden, thinking quietly as she watered her flowers. He approached her gently and wrapped his arms around her from behind. My love, how are you feeling after today? He asked softly. Amara leaned back against his chest and said, I am okay physically, but my heart is heavy thinking about others who are not as fortunate as we are. Chaik was not surprised by her response because he had fallen in love with Amara's compassionate heart many years ago. Tell me what you are thinking, he said as they sat together on the garden bench. Amara explained her idea about starting a legal aid foundation, and Chaik listened carefully to every word. You know, my dear, he said when she finished, I had a similar conversation today with government officials about police reform. It seems we are both thinking along the same lines. They talked for hours about their plans and dreams for helping their fellow citizens. This was what made their marriage so strong. They were not just husband and wife, but partners in making their country a better place. As the sun set over Lagos, they made a promise to each other that Amara's experience would not be in vain, but would become the starting point for positive change in their society. 2 weeks later, the story of what happened on Balogun Street had spread far beyond Lagos. Local newspapers picked up the story, and it became a topic of discussion on radio shows across Nigeria. But the real impact was happening in police stations, government offices, and community meetings, where people began talking seriously about justice and equality. Sergeant Johnson and his partner were suspended from duty, pending a full investigation of their conduct. However, Chaik and Amara had asked that the officers be given a chance to learn from their mistakes, rather than simply being punished. People can change if given the right opportunity and guidance, Amara had told the police commissioner. As a result, both officers were enrolled in a special training program about citizen rights and proper police procedures. The tall officer, Sergeant Johnson, was deeply affected by the experience and began volunteering with community groups in his spare time. He realized that his attitude toward poor people had been shaped by his own difficult childhood, and he wanted to break that cycle of prejudice. The shorter officer took longer to change, but eventually he too began to see how his actions had been wrong. The store owner, Mama Ngozi's shop became an unexpected symbol of transformation in the community. After the incident, Chike had quietly paid for security cameras to be installed not just in her store, but in dozens of other small businesses on Balagan Street. He also provided interest-free loans to help store owners improve their security and keep better records of their daily transactions. Mama Ngozi herself became one of Amara's strongest supporters and often told customers about the importance of treating everyone with respect. "That day taught me that jumping to conclusions can destroy innocent people's lives," she would say. "Now I always stop and think carefully before I accuse anyone of anything." Her store became a place where people from different social classes felt welcome and comfortable shopping together. Children from the neighborhood started calling her Mama Justice because she always tried to be fair in her dealings with customers. This small change in one person's behavior created ripple effects throughout the entire community. 6 months after the incident, Amara officially launched the Justice for All Foundation with a big ceremony attended by government officials, community leaders, and hundreds of ordinary citizens. The foundation's mission was to provide free legal help to people who could not afford lawyers and to educate citizens about their rights under Nigerian law. "Every person in this country deserves equal treatment under the law," Amara said in her speech. "Your bank account should not determine the quality of justice you receive." The foundation opened offices in 5 major cities and trained dozens of young lawyers to work with poor communities. Chike's police training program was also showing remarkable results, with crime rates dropping and citizen complaints against police decreasing significantly. The program became a model that other African countries wanted to copy for their own police forces. But perhaps the most important change was in how ordinary people began treating each other with more respect and understanding across social and economic lines. 1 year later, Amara returned to Balagan Street for a special community celebration. The narrow road had been improved with better lighting and drainage, and several new businesses had opened, creating jobs for local people. As she walked through the market, she was greeted warmly by vendors and shoppers who remembered her story. An elderly woman selling vegetables called out, "Mama Amara, thank you for what you did for all of us." A young man who worked as a mechanic said, "Sister, your foundation helped my brother when he was wrongly accused of stealing a car. He is free now because of your lawyers." Amara felt overwhelmed with joy, seeing how one difficult day had led to so many positive changes. She stopped at Mama Ngozi's store, which was now thriving with customers from all walks of life. "Mama Ngozi," she said with a warm smile, "look how much has changed since that day." The store owner hugged her tightly and said, "My daughter, you turned my mistake into a blessing for this whole community. That is the work of God through good people like you." As Amara walked back to her car, she reflected on how life can take unexpected turns that lead to beautiful outcomes. She had started that morning just wanting to buy bread for her sick mother, but ended up helping to transform an entire system of justice in her country. This was the true meaning of turning trials into triumphs and pain into purpose for the benefit of all humanity.